Sometimes a single military strike can send shockwaves all around the world. But what happens when that strike hits a nation that's, well, actively trying to broker peace? It doesn't just create shockwaves, it can actually fracture the very foundations of the global order. So let's dive right into the emergency Doha Summit and what it's telling us about the world we're living in, a world that's definitely in flux.
And really, that's the core question of this whole crisis, isn't it? For 2 years, you had Qatar, along with Egypt and the US, right at the center of these incredibly intense negotiations to end the war in Gaza. Think of them as the bridge between two sides. And then, the bridge itself gets bombed.
So here's how it all went down. The crisis kicked off on September 9th, 2025. An Israeli strike hits a residential area in Doha. And look, this wasn't just some random act. It was a direct attack on the process of peace itself, happening in the capital city of the nation that was leading the whole thing. And this quote from Qatar's emir, wow, it just captures the absolute disbelief and the deep sense of betrayal that filled the room at that emergency summit. I mean, he basically said, this wasn't just an attack. It was, and I'm quoting here, a treacherous and cowardly act against a country that was just trying to make peace. Okay, you really have to understand this. The timing here is absolutely everything. This strike didn't just happen in a vacuum. No, it happened at the exact moment that the Hamas leadership was in Doha looking over a US-backed ceasefire proposal. So you see, this wasn't just an attack on a city. It was a direct hit on a live, high-stakes diplomatic effort. The stakes couldn't have been higher. And the reaction? It was immediate and honestly historic. A strike that was probably intended to target just a few people ended up uniting so many. Suddenly, you had leaders from all across the Arab and Islamic world flying into Doha. It was a show of solidarity like we've never seen before. The final statement that came out of this summit was crystal clear. They weren't messing around. This wasn't just, we condemn this. No, it was a call for real, concrete action. They wanted international accountability. They made a declaration of collective security. And they even directly suggested that other nations should start rethinking their diplomatic and economic ties with Israel. That's a huge deal. This one simple sentence from the press conference after the summit, it just summed up the whole thing. It tells you everything you need to know. For the first time in decades, you had Arab and Islamic states speaking with one single voice against an act of aggression. We're talking about a seismic shift in how the region operates. So let's zoom out for a second, because this shift goes way beyond just the region. A lot of analysts are arguing that this single moment represents a direct challenge to the world order that's been in place for, over half a century? An order that's been largely backed and guaranteed by the United States. And right at the heart of this challenge is something called the petrodollar system. It sounds complicated, but it's pretty simple. For decades, U.S. dominance has been tied to the fact that oil is traded in dollars. It's a system built on a very delicate arrangement, and here's the key part, trust. Trust in U.S. protection. Well, this attack, it shook that trust right to its core. See, the old way of doing things relied on a kind of fragmented Arab world, where the U.S. was the ultimate security guard for all its key allies in the region. But this crisis, it totally exposed what one report called America's inability to manage the contradictions between its allies. And when that happens, you create a vacuum. A vacuum that challengers like China and Russia are more than happy to step into. And of course, these big geopolitical cracks have immediate and pretty profound economic consequences. This stuff isn't just about diplomacy and high-level politics. It's about who ends up paying the price when the whole global system gets thrown into chaos. But before we get into the economics, it's really crucial to remember the human cost that's the backdrop for all of this. At the summit, Iran's president brought everyone back to earth by citing a number. Over 64,000 people killed in Gaza in the last 2 years. That just grounds all this high-level political talk in a really devastating reality. So let's follow the money. Who actually benefits from all this chaos? And who loses? Well, one analysis suggests that crises like this one, they create a massive upward redistribution of wealth. So while arms manufacturers and big energy companies see their profits just skyrocket, it's the working classes everywhere from the Arab world to the West who end up bearing the costs through things like inflation and cuts to public services. So what does this all add up to? Where are we headed? It really feels like this one single strike in Doha was a crystallizing moment. It's like it hit the accelerator on a global shift that's been simmering under the surface for years, and now it's pushing us into a new and pretty uncertain reality.
Ultimately, what we might be witnessing here is, as one report puts it so well, the unraveling of an American-led order, an order that has pretty much defined global politics for generations. And the fundamental trust that held the whole thing together, well, it seems to have been broken.
And that leaves us with one last, really vital question. We've seen how this unprecedented unity has exposed all the cracks in the old system. But as we move towards this more multipolar world, what comes next? Will it lead to a more just and balanced international order, or will it just unleash new and even more unpredictable kinds of conflict? That right there is the great uncertainty.